There have been many Pokémon games that deviate from the mainline games that we're used to. Whether it be something as simple as Pokémon Snap or the Colosseum games, there have been some successful ventures outside of what we might call a normal Pokémon game. And this leads us to one spin-off, a roguelite called Mystery Dungeon. The concept is very simple, but there is one that stands out. And oh boy does this one stand out. After the success of the 4th generation, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness, and then later Sky was released. Having recently played through Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Darkness, I can say that this is easily one of the best Pokémon games ever made. In recent years, Game Freak have gotten a lot of criticism with some of the recent games, and if it wasn't for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and that being a large stain on that narrative, maybe there would be more outsourcing for some of the games. Explorers of Darkness and Time and Sky are perfect examples of when the developers of the game just cooked. Chunsoft were in charge of Mystery Dungeon games, and yes, that includes the 3DS ones that were not so great. Not to mention that the company that owns them in recent years has had quite the controversy. But if you remember and love the old Mystery Dungeon games, why don't you leave a like and subscribe, and let's get into this video. You load up the game to start a new adventure, only to be bombarded with a questionnaire. What is this, some scam BuzzFeed article? The game starts asking you questions about your life, what you would do in different scenarios, and it all leads into one major thing. Which Pokemon are you? Yeah, it really is like a BuzzFeed article. The choices are the Gen 1 through 4 starters, Pikachu, Meowth, Skitty, and Munchlax. If you answer certain questions correctly, and maybe reset the game a bit, you can get the starter you want. But there is also the selection of your team members. I went for the combination of Pikachu and Mudkip, and having Mudkip as my partner is probably the single best decision, not just for gameplay, but also for the story. You pick the Pokemon you want to play with, and then it's a black screen, and some text. Hold on, it says. All of this for us to see Mudkip, who in this playthrough I named Kippers. Kippers comes over and finds us passed out on a beach. Not even 5 minutes into this game, we tell this Pokemon that we are a human and have lost our memory. It's not too long later when a Koffing and Zubat ambush us and take this relic fragment that Kippers has. And off they go into a mystery dungeon. Now, the mystery dungeons are pretty cool. They're completely randomly generating dungeons with many items, money, and enemy Pokemon. When completing a dungeon, you end up at the final room and end your journey. If you fail the dungeon, you lose most of your items at random and all of your money. In this case of the first dungeon, when you get to the end, you have to fight the Koffing and the Zubat. And when doing so, you get the relic fragment back. It is after this when Kippers mentions the Wigglytuff Guild. He wants to join and be an exploration team, but doesn't have the courage. This is courage we give him by agreeing to be an exploration team together. And then we enter the guild. We meet a lot of characters, so let's just get through them. You've got Chatot, Wigglytuff, Bidoof, Corphish, Sunflora, Chimecho, Diglett, Loudred, and Dugtrio. While each of these characters have their own personalities and are extremely well chosen, not just for their roles, but for their characterizations, the two best, I think, are Chatot and Bidoof. Wigglytuff is great, but Bidoof being the newest recruit before you and your closest friend, not only in your team work really well in many places. Chatot has one of the craziest story arcs you'll see in a Pokemon game, and even though those two work so well, doesn't mean the others don't work at all. Each Pokemon has their own unique job at the guild, and it fits their Pokemon very well. For example, Chimecho makes the food, which is actually the only unusual one, but also has a later role with adding new Pokemon to your exploration team and ringing its bell to add them. I'd go through each Pokemon and their role, but I'm going to assume you're interested in what happens in this game, and since there is a lot, I think I should get a move on. we become an official exploration team at the guild, and we're given an exploration bag, badge, and name. I went with Team Dreadnought. We get a tutorial of how the guild works and Treasure Town. First, with the guild, there are 2 boards for job listings. One is for Pokémon Outlaws, and the other is miscellaneous tasks. They can range from helping a lost Pokémon, exploring with a Pokémon, or giving an item to a Pokémon in a dungeon. You can get various items or money for completing the dungeons, and of the money you only actually receive 10% as the guild takes almost all of the money for running costs. Lovely. Treasure Town is pretty simple. You have item storage, the bank, the merchants, and a few other things that pop up throughout the game. We are introduced to one concept of the game, that being the disruption of time. It is unknown what is causing this, but it is causing more Pokemon to become evil, hence the reason behind why the guild is so important in helping catch these Pokemon. The start is fairly simple, with running a few dungeons, learning more about the guild, and doing a few mini-games like the Sentry Duty. As nice as the Sentry Duty minigame is at just a nice break from the main game, it does get completely forgotten about after a while. This takes us all the way to the 2 brothers, Meryl and Azurill. There's a backstory for them, but for the sake of our story, this is the first big chapter. A Pokemon called Drowsy says it will help Azurill find some lost item. But as Drowsy and Azurill leave, Drowsy runs into us, and we see Drowsy hurting Azurill. Not long later, we see Drowsy pop up on the Outlaws board, and we go to save Azurill. Meryl tells us the dungeon they went to, and catch up to find Drowsy, take him down, and rescue Azurill. But this is the first time we've learned about this strange ability, and I'm sure it won't be the last. This is when we get word from Chatot to explore a nearby waterfall. When we get there, Kippers thinks there is no way past it because of the waterfall in the way. When we touch the waterfall, however, we get a vision from the past, seeing a figure jump through the waterfall. We tell this to Kippers, who in turn believes us after a while, and we jump through the waterfall to find the Waterfall Cave. This takes me to another point, which is the soundtrack. This game has a crazy unique soundtrack for almost every single dungeon and area of this game, and they're all really good. Pokemon games in general have had great soundtracks, but this has to be one of, if not the best. I'll definitely be using these in some of my Let's Play videos during battles, so if you want to listen, you can always just watch my Let's Plays. Shameless plug over, when we get to the end of the dungeon, we see these large gemstones, and we touch the largest one, we have a vision. One of a big wave coming to take us away. Before we can tell Kippers, a big wave takes us away. This takes us to the hot springs, where the town elder, Torkoal, lives. After talking with him, we go back to the guild, empty-handed, but learning 2 things. The first being the figure we saw in the flashbacks. It was Wigglytuff, who had already explored the cave, and completely forgotten. The second is the ability we have. We can see the past and the future depending on things we touch, and if they mean something. The next big story plot point is the exploration to Fogbound Lake. One important thing that is mentioned is how not every Pokemon can go on this adventure, so only the best will go. A few things happen here, one with Team Skull being somewhat central. So remember that Zubat and Weezing from earlier? So they're part of Team Skull led by Skuntank. Team Skull overhears us talking about the exploration and weasel their way into the guild to join the expedition. Few bits of shenanigans happen with them eating all the food at the guild, which means we have to go get perfect apples for Wigglytuff. When we reach the perfect apples, Team Skull are there waiting, knock us out, and we leave empty-handed again. When we get back, we're told we will be not joining the expedition. Wigglytuff is about to rage without the perfect apples before Skuntank steps in and hands it one to earn the guild's trust. Disgusted, we head to bed that night. When we learn about who's actually going on the exploration, it turns out It's the whole guild, including us. Why? Because Wigglytuff being Wigglytuff. So, we set off for Fogbound Lake with a little help from Bidoof at first. This takes us to an important point of the story that also needs a little bit more context. There are these things called time gears, and we can see during a few cutscenes that a Pokémon, Grovyle, is stealing them. The time gears help with the flow of time in certain areas around the world, and when the time gears are taken away, time stops in those areas. The time gears are an important part of this story, but not quite yet. Oh, the other important factor is a Pokemon that protects Fogbound Lake, Yuxi, who has the power to erase memories. With our character having lost their memory, this might be a Pokemon that could help us remember who we are. When we finally reach the base camp, we set off to discover the lake, but in doing so, Kipper finds a red stone, and we carry on. After going through the same dungeons a few times, we finally end up at a Groudon statue. We ask Kippers if we can touch the stone he found, and with our ability we actually learn what to do. We have to put the stone at the heart of the Groudon statue, and when we do that, not only does the fog clear, but we see where the lake actually is. It's above us. But before we can set off, Team Skull comes in to try and take the glory. But just before they attack, Wigglytuff appears and everything changes. We end up going on ahead, and while going through the next dungeons, we see some cutscenes of what's happening between Team Skull and Wigglytuff. After jamming out in a few different dungeons, we finally make our way to the top, where we are stopped by Groudon. Yes, the second boss fight in this game is a Groudon. Luckily, ground types aren't immune to electric attacks in this game, because the main strategy for taking out Groudon was paralyzing him and relying on Kipper's super effective attacks. I remember this fight being much tougher when I was younger, but understanding the items better and having more strategy helped. When we defeated Groudon, we learned that it wasn't actually the real Pokemon, but just an illusion made by Yuxi, who we now meet and is about to erase our memory. But just before that, Yuxi hesitates because Kipper says we actually came to ask Yuxi a question about my memory. Yuxi says they don't know us and didn't erase our memory, and not long after that, the whole guild shows up. We see a really cool geyser show and swear not to mention the lake or the time gear that is hidden there. Oh yeah, time gear is also hidden here. We head back empty-handed, but also we know about this new cool area. Coming back to Treasure Town, we learn of a great explorer, one by the name of Dusknoir. A new explorer, but one who has gained a lot of fame in a very short amount of time. Dusknoir comes to visit the guild to learn about our exploration to Fogbound Lake, only to learn that we totally didn't find anything. That is until we learned that the time gear from the lake has been stolen by Grovyle not long after we were there. Either way, before all that goes down, we then meet Dusknoir in Treasure Town with Azurill and Meryl to learn about an item they lost, and we learn it's called the Water Float, and that it's rare. Of course, Team Skull overhears this and starts planning. Not long later, we are told that the water float is in Amp Plains, so we head there to get the item once and for all. Once we go there, Meryl tells Dusknoir where we are, where the explorer mentions Amp Plains is an incredibly dangerous place this time of year and rushes off. Now, that danger is a pack of Luxio, led by Luxray. And even after winning the tricky battle, Dusknoir comes and saves us at the last minute, and the Luxray pack leaves, only for Team Skull to show themselves, who had been hiding this whole time. But they run as fast as they can knowing Dusknoir is here. After giving back the water float to Meryl and Azurill, Kippers mentions our ability, and surprisingly, Dusknoir knows what this is called, the Dimensional Scream. And so, we take him to the beach where Kippers found us at the beginning of the game. We also tell Dusk Noir that we used to be a human, and our name. And that's when Dusk Noir does something really weird. Our character describes it as a smile before dismissing knowing us. Something seems off, but it's probably nothing. I mean, it's the Great Dusk Noir. Later, in the guild, we learn officially about the time gear at Fogbound Lake being taken. Dusk Noir asks why we didn't mention it before, secrecy stuff, and then we learn about the outlaw, Grovyle, and that our guild is going to be the one who turns Grovyle in. So, we split up and go exploring the Northern Desert. So, we tripped through the Northern Desert, and well, we didn't really find anything but large quicksand pits. But we do have this weird feeling that something's here, a feeling that we actually had it earlier at Fogbound Lake. And a time gear was there, so maybe there is a time gear here. But we head back empty-handed to the guild. The next day, we insist to Kippers that we should go back and check again. When we go back, we actually jump through the quicksand and enter a whole new dungeon. At the end of 2 long dungeons, we meet Mesprit, who immediately attacks us because they learn through Yuxi what happened and think we're here to steal the time gear. We have to beat Mesprit, but in doing so, we leave the door open for none other than Grovyle himself to just wander in at the right moment to steal the time gear. We stood no chance against him, and now that's another time gear lost. When reporting to the guild, Dusk Noir decides that one of the places another exploration team searched might have the last time gear. Because Bidoof collected an item from Crystal Cave, we're able to use the Dimensional Scream to see if there's a time gear there. And, lo and behold, we see Grovyle and Azelf, the protector of the last time gear. So we head to Crystal Cave, end up doing a cool puzzle with some colored crystals, and make our way to Azelf. Azelf already has a safety net for Grovyle, even though we end up having to beat him in battle. But after beating him, Dusk Noir comes up, and he just escapes before Dusk Noir can catch him. This takes us to the master plan and a huge reveal. Dusk Noir and Grovyle are Pokémon from the future. Grovyle is a fugitive who escaped to the past, and Dusk Noir is here to catch him. Dusk Noir asks to be the one to catch Grovyle and says he must do it alone, and a few days later, Grovyle is caught. The time gears are restored, and Dusk Noir says goodbye before going back to the future. But then, Dusk Noir says one last thing, asks our team to step forward for one final goodbye. That is, at least, before dragging us into the future. And so, here we are, in the future, waking up in a jail cell. Kippers is already awake, and there's no escaping. Then some Sableye come in and blindfold us, and then the reveal. We're tied up on post, with Grovyle to be executed. The Great Dusk Noir, for some reason, has sentenced us to a fate that doesn't fit his character from the past. But Grovyle has a plan. When the Sableye attack, we attack back and hide with Grovyle as he uses Dig. When we get the chance to break free, it works. Dusk Noir leaves us, and I guess to try and find us, but we were underground the whole time. And for the first time, we get to see this world, dark, paralyzed. This is what the future looks like. We rush out with Grovyle, but Kippers doesn't trust him. Kippers isn't sure what to believe, even with the reasonable argument Grovyle makes about Dusk Noir's actions, but Grovyle doesn't travel with Pokemon who don't trust him. But before he leaves, he mentions the planet's paralysis, and the difference between how Dusk Noir had explained the planet's paralysis and Grovyle talking about it conflicts Kippers, but we do have to move on to some really tricky dungeons. Upon leaving the dungeons, Kippers explains how he just doesn't know who to believe. The things he learned from Dusk Noir, but was it just one big con? We tell Kippers that we should go find Grovyle, especially since Grovyle knows how to get to the past. and also our only option is to trust him too. Kippers can't quite trust Grovyle, but is willing to for the time being since he's still conflicted. And so, we continue after Grovyle. And as we continue through more dungeons, we find Grovyle on the ground. He was ambushed by another Pokémon. And we have a boss fight against Spiritomb. It isn't actually that tricky, because of Thunder Wave and a few hard-hitting moves like Thunderbolt, but turns out Spiritomb is a coward when defeated and runs off as fast as possible. We continue out of the dungeon with Grovyle and stop to talk to him. Kippers tells Grovyle point blank he doesn't trust him because he doesn't know who to trust, just that he wants to know more about this world and what's going on. This is where we learn about the planet's paralysis. In our time, the temporal tower, controlled by Dialga, the controller of time, collapsed. This sent the world into paralysis, and Dialga into a primal state, a state where Dialga is controlled by darkness. This is when Grovyle drops the bombshell that he went back in time to stop the planet paralysis by stealing the time gears. By taking the time gears to the temporal tower, it would stop the collapse. And the time that was stopped due to the time gears being removed would start once again once placed in the tower. This is where we learn that Dusknoir is actually an agent sent by Primal Dialga and working for it. An agent sent to stop anyone messing with the darkness of the future world that we are currently in. All of a sudden, Kippers starts to head back to ask Dusknoir his version of the story that was just told, but Grovyle talks him out of that because it would be really stupid and walking straight back into the enemy's lair. Grovyle mentions that he's gonna find Celebi in order to get back to our time. Grovyle goes on ahead, and we follow after him through the dungeons. We also get some cutscenes of Dusknoir talking to Primal Dialga, and that Dusknoir has set a trap for us. And Dusknoir is asking Dialga for assistance. As we don't really know this yet, we enter the Dusk Forest, the dungeon that takes us to Celebi. We meet up with Celebi, who Kippers immediately insults, which is kinda funny. Grovyle then asks Celebi's help for one more time, and Celebi agrees to bring us to the Passage of Time. The Passage of Time would bring us back to our time, or at least Kippers' time. This is before Celebi looks at us in disbelief, but shrugs it off. Bit strange, really. And so, another dungeon, and on towards the Passage of Time. When we get to the Passage of Time, however, something happens. Dusknoir ambushes us with a squad of Sableye. This way, Dusknoir could just capture everyone, including Celebi. Just as it looks as like we're gonna have to fight our way past everyone, Dusknoir chimes in with one other thing. Primal Dialga has joined Dusknoir for this ambush. Grovyle claims that this is the end, and we can only be defeated and surrenders to Dusknoir. But then, Grovyle mentions one last thing, that he wasn't alone in going into the past. He had a partner he got separated with, and should still be collecting the time gears. This is when Dusknoir laughs and asks Grovyle to say the name of his partner, someone who happens to share our own name. But they aren't sharing our own name, it's actually just us. We actually are Grovyle's partner, and here we are, back in the future, trapped with everyone else, and we're not in the past collecting time gears like Grovyle thought. Except there's one problem. Grovyle's partner was a human, but we were once a human, as stated right from the beginning. What gave us away? Our ability. The Dimensional Scream. That time when Dusknoir was on the beach with us talking about our ability and who we are, and we noticed he smiled? Yeah, that's why. He'd discovered us. He knew he only had to find Grovyle now. It seemed that all is over, but then Kippers tells us to not give up, and actually comes up with an idea. And that idea is for Celebi to teleport us just a short distance, straight to the Passage of Time. Celebi doesn't know if it'll work, but tries at the last minute, and wouldn't you know, it worked. Dialga reveals us, but we're able to get back just in time, and with Celebi blocking Dusknoir just at the last moment, we're able to go back into the past. Or is it our current time? It's actually all a bit confusing. The new question is whether we have ended up in a hostile environment. You know, where they still think Grovile's a criminal? Which probably is the case depending on how Kippers felt for most of the entire time in the future. So we need somewhere to stay, but not be detective, and Kippers is just the place for us. The Sharpedo Bluff, a place where he stayed before joining the guild. Grovile gives us a bit more backstory on his journey into the past, how we were investigating the planet's paralysis and using the ability to find out more about the time gears, where they were, and how to get to them. We also learned about one new thing with the Dimensional Scream. It only works with a trusted partner. When we developed Amnesia, we found a new trusted partner in Kippers. We also learned that in this time, the Dimensional Scream works outside of just areas where the time gears are. At dawn, Kippers and Grovile have a heart-to-heart about trusting us, and it's really touching. It doesn't add to the progression of the story, but it is nice to see how two characters such at odds now having this shared relation and trust. The next day, we go back to the first dungeon where Grovile collected a time gear, the Tree Shroud Forest, which, incidentally, is probably the most difficult dungeon we'd encountered up to this point. Mainly because I was saving items like Reviver Seeds and Oranberries, but it did take a few tries. After collecting the time gears, Grovile notes that the time didn't return normal here, and the Pokémon got a lot tougher. But also that we have to split up, as we actually need to get to Temporal Tower, and we don't really know how to get to it. This is because it has something to do with the Hidden Lands, and I don't think I need to explain why that might be a slight problem. So, we figure out that while Grovile collects time gears, there's no better place to figure out where the Hidden Land is than go to the Wigglytuff Guild. We are greeted by the whole Wigglytuff Guild when we come back, and everyone was worried about us. We tell the full story, how Grovile is the good guy and Dusknoir is evil, how the time gears are to go to the Temporal Tower beyond the Hidden Land. But would they believe us? Well, it seems like Chatot doesn't, saying our story's ridiculous and no one would believe that. But then the rest of the guild chimes in with the main oddity. Dusknoir dragged us into the future. That's when Wigglytuff chimes in and backs us, and then asks Chatot to sort of tell Chatot to believe us. And thus, the new goal for the guild is find the Hidden Land. But where to start? Well, we start with going to the hot springs to ask the town elder Torkoal what he knows. He doesn't know much, but there is something he can't quite remember. Defeated, we headed back to the guild, only for Torkoal to come back the next morning with a clue that the proof to get into the Hidden Land is a certain distinct inscription. This is when Kipper just whips out his relic fragment, and lo and behold, that's the distinct inscription. It was here with Kippers all along. Then Wigglytuff mentions that he's seen this pattern before, and Chatot also remembers, at Brine Cave, a difficult area, and at the deepest part, a gang of bandits. There's just one hiccup. As Torkoal leaves, he gets ambushed by Team Skull. They really are just annoying. We head to the beach to try and see if Grovile is there, but instead, no one is on the beach. We talk about the relic fragment only for Team Skull to overhear everything. Oh yeah, we also see a Lapras at sea. We also see that Wigglytuff isn't at dinner, apparently running an important errand. This is talking to Lapras in a very cryptic way. Something about needing to break a promise. So we head to Brine Cave, accompanied by Chatot, in one of the most challenging locations up to this point. But then halfway through, Team Skull barge in and take the relic fragment. Chatot is absolutely bewildered and never realized Team Skull were bad. Chatot chases after them in revenge, and we quickly follow too. When we reach the end of Brine Cave, we see Team Skull completely knocked out from Chatot. In a rare bit of mercy, Skuntank gives us back the relic fragment, but Chatot is ahead of us, looking for the bandits, and then they appear from up above. Kabutops and the Amistar brothers. Before they can attack us, Chatot blocks the attack. We defeat the bandits and check on Chatot before the rest of the guild rush in with Grovyle. Chatot feels bad being defeated twice in the same way, but Wigglytuff mentions about how great of a protector Chatot has been. But while the guild rushes Chatot back to the guild, it's time for me, Kippers, and Grovyle to head to the Hidden Lands, and we see the inscription on the wall. When we put the relic fragment on the ground, a beam of light shoots out, and then it appears. Lapras. Lapras is the guide to the Hidden Lands, and so we ride on the back of Lapras off to the Hidden Lands and learn the backstory of why Wigglytuff knows Lapras. When Wigglytuff and Chatot were exploring Brine Cave, they came across the same bandits, and Chatot saved Wigglytuff, who then defeated the bandits. In a moment of need, Lapras appeared for Wigglytuff to save Chatot, but with the promise to keep Lapras and the Hidden Lands a secret, which is why Wigglytuff had gone, saying he needed to break the promise to save the world. Lapras also mentioned to Wigglytuff that the relic fragment chooses who it appears to, and it chose Kippers. The Hidden Land itself is in a gap through time, so finally we see Lapras swimming, but not over water, but over the Sea of Time, and onwards to the Hidden Land. We see the Temporal Tower already starting its collapse. We may only just be in time, so we quickly head forwards onto our last few dungeons. And the Hidden Lands, they're pretty tough. But we eventually get through them, and we find the ancient temple, the inscriptions of legendary Pokémon on the walls. We see a hole where the relic fragment would go, and then a rune containing unknown script that Grovyle can read. This is the Rainbow Stone ship, and it takes us to the Temporal Tower. But then, just as Kippers is about to use and put his relic fragment down, a voice tells us to stop. And guess who it is? A bunch of Sableye and Dusknoir. Dusknoir tries once again to take us to the future, but we push back the Sableye and prepare for a fight against the mighty Dusknoir. This tricky fight required some Cross-Eye Seeds and Thunderwave strategy, but eventually we take down all the Sableye, and then finally Dusknoir. But Dusknoir has one final trick up his sleeve, or sort of stomach. But Dusknoir takes final stand, opens the mouth on his stomach, and we force our combined moves onto his stomach, knocking him out. The Sableye, seeing Dusknoir defeated, run away. Grovyle tells Kippers to get the Rainbow Stone ship ready, and then we learn something. Something from both Dusknoir and Grovyle, something that completely changes this story. If we alter the history of this world, we, the character, the Pikachu, partner of Kippers and Grovyle, will disappear, as time will have changed, and the future with us and Grovyle and Dusknoir and Celebi will never exist. But what matters is restoring time for everyone else who would be affected, a sacrifice for the betterment of the world. But Kippers, what about Kippers? How would he feel all about this? Could we even tell him? We see Kippers activating the Rainbow Stone ship, before Dusknoir revives himself and attacks us and Grovyle. But then, Grovyle gets up and starts forcing Dusknoir in the time warp thingy. He drops the time gears and Kippers comes back to get us. Grovyle is going to take Dusknoir back to the future and leave the final task in our hands. But we can't think about the short goodbye to Grovyle, because we have to go to the Temporal Tower. And Grovyle's last words are ringing in our head. And one final mission. One last mission with Kippers. This is the last adventure. We ride up to the Temporal Tower. We see that it is starting to collapse, and we get to the base of the tower. The tower glowing red due to the time disruption, and the ground shaking. We enter. When we get to the top of what's incredibly hard 2 dungeons, we see the time storm is raging. The tower is shaking and collapse, but we see ahead of us where the time gears must go. There's one issue. We're just too late. Dialga has gone into its primal state, and is stopping us to place the time gears. The only way to bring Dialga to reason and save the stoppage of time is to defeat the legendary Pokémon of time. The battle is difficult, as while Dialga does not have a crazy amount of health, it has an IQ trait that makes it not take any damage from most attacks. This and the incredibly powerful move Roar of Time makes Dialga truly a strong final boss. It took a long time and many cross-eye seeds, but we finally take down Primal Dialga. This ended in one last moment to restore time and place the time gears as the tower is on the verge of collapse. Kippers runs up and places the time gears in the slots, and then were we too late? We see the destruction, and then it seems that things are back to normal. Have we done it? And then there's Dialga in his normal state, and everything is back to normal. Time has started moving again. Dialga shows us that everything is back to normal except the temporal tower itself, which needs to be rebuilt. We did it. Us and Kippers have made it so that time won't stop. This is where we can take the Rainbow Stone ship back to the Hidden Land. But we're struggling to keep up with Kippers, as our disappearance is coming near, and then it's happening. We tell Kippers goodbye, and explain how because we are a Pokemon or human or whatever of the future, we're gonna disappear. And with the light around us, we say our final goodbye to our friend, our partner, and guildmate, Kippers. This is a Kippers who will spend the rest of this journey back to Treasure Town alone and crying. It's probably the saddest and most emotional 8 minutes of any Pokemon game. We see a returning Kippers at Treasure Town and back at the guild, explaining everything and why I'm no longer here, telling the story, and life moves on. Till one day Kippers goes for a walk to the beach where everything started. With the Krabbies blowing bubbles at dusk, the beautiful scene that Kippers had missed. The last time we had seen it was when he met us for the first time. A flashback to the time that Kippers meets us. Our forming of our team, the fun times, the adventures we'd gone through together. Fighting challenging bosses, seeing beautiful sights, meeting surprising allies through devious friends. But it all is stemming back to us joining the guild, the confidence that we gave Kippers to live his dream, the trust between us and trying to save the world, the memories we made, and now we are gone. Bidoof comes to check on the crying Kippers on the beach, a Kippers who misses us and whose cry is heard far beyond just that beach. And so, the credits play. The game is over. But is it? Is this really the ending? Should we be in the same amount of tears that Kippers is in? Yes! When the credits fade and we see the temporal tower and Dialga says he feels the pain of Kippers, and feels that it needs to give thanks to Kippers. And a beam of light appears, and just like that, we are back. The end. It's just one huge emotional roller coaster, and easily the best story of any Pokemon game. At times it reads like a novel, and being broken into chapters and adventure, new places and Pokemon to be a part of your team. You finish with a nice reprieve of us coming back to Kippers. A story of adventure and friendship, deceit and trust. This game fits perfectly into the Hall of Fame that is the DS era of Pokemon games. Yes, this game isn't perfect, but what it gets right more than makes up for it. Everything from the story, to the dungeons themselves, to the soundtracks and the characters, this is one of the best Pokemon games that we've almost forgotten about. And it isn't over. I recorded about 20 hours of gameplay to make this video, and the end of the game is only half of it. There are still more adventures to be had between Joey and Kippers, so stay tuned for part 2. Goodbye, and take care.